Tonight, a region on edge. The president's hostage envoy expresses cautious optimism.
The meetings with Hamas gave me some hope.
Even as the Middle East teeters towards spiraling into chaos and economic unease.
Well, I think the tariffs are going to be the greatest thing we've ever done as a country.
Stocks continue their slide after President Trump refuses to rule out a possible recession. And shutdown countdown. The latest as lawmakers race to secure government funding through September. Plus, sticker shock.
But there's never been no eggs.
The government's plan to bring down the high price of eggs. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A shaky ceasefire with the world watching. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, Israel is sending negotiators to Qatar in a last-ditch effort to keep a fragile ceasefire alive and to bring more hostages home. It comes as Israel ramps up the pressure on Hamas by cutting off aid and electricity to millions in Gaza. President Trump's hostage envoy says he's cautiously optimistic after engaging in direct talks with the terror group.
One, it gave me hope that there would eventually be an end to something that's not productive for many countries. It gave me hope that there would be an opportunity to rebuild Gaza and that there was some flexibility on the Hamas side where there wasn't.
The clock is ticking, though. The first phase of the January ceasefire deal ended back on March 1st with no path forward. While full-scale fighting has not resumed, many fear the next move could change everything. Well, as talks over the Gaza war continue, another potential crisis. President Trump drawing a red line with Iran, telling the regime not to pursue a nuclear weapon. And if it does, warning it'll face military action. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with Iran's mixed response. Caitlin, is there a possible deal in the making?
John, President Trump said last week that he'd written a letter to Ayatollah Khamenei urging negotiation on a new nuclear deal with Washington. Saturday, the Ayatollah initially rejected the offer, claiming Trump would just be looking to exert dominance and impose new demands. Now, the regime says talks are back on the table.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman maintains a letter from President Trump never made it to leadership. He adds that negotiations will be considered as long as talks stick to concerns about the militarization of its nuclear program. While Iran's messaging appears unclear, in an interview with Fox News, President Trump says the regime is running out of time.
The time is happening now. The time is coming up. Something's going to happen one way or the other.
Former State Department advisor Gabriel Nerona, now with Polaris National Security, says the regime isn't in a position to ignore the offer of diplomacy.
Their proxies in Iraq are starting to show signs of weakening. Syria is gone. Hezbollah is decimated. Hamas is decimated. And they have the Houthis left as now their strongest proxy. This is not an Iran that is able to carry out the massive destructive threats against Israel and the United States that there were when President Trump was in office the first time.
Nerona says military action could make things tenuous for Iran because the regime doesn't have much else to lose.
I think what the regime fears the most is that the regime, without that nuclear safety net, would be on the verge of collapse. And that if the Israel and the United States are striking its programs, that the Iranian people would rise up. And so they're going to be prepared to do absolutely anything in their power to respond in the event of an attack.
According to the latest report from the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran's enriched uranium is up to 60% purity near weapons grade, and it could have enough for as many as 6 bombs. The agency now warns the situation is of serious concern and time for diplomacy is running out.
President Trump, as well as all of his predecessors, have said they will not permit Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Iran is on the threshold now, really on the threshold of a nuclear weapon. And so the implicit threat is that military force is the alternative if Iran is not willing to come to the table and resolve this peacefully.
Iran, China, and Russia kicked off an annual joint military exercise Monday in the Gulf of Oman. Despite this growing partnership, Noronha says while it's something to watch, he doesn't believe China and Russia would provide much support if the U.S. takes military action on Iran. John?
All right, CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you, Caitlin. Well, Jonathan Saya joins us now. He is a research analyst at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome to you, Jonathan. So how seriously should we take President Trump's warning? Is military action truly on the table, or do you think this is more about strategic pressure?
It certainly is on the table, and the numerous air drills held between the United States, CENTCOM, and Israel truly demonstrate that threat to Tehran. Now, the other angle from this is that the Islamic Republic in Iran perceives its nuclear program as its main line of deterrence. The other two lines of deterrence being its proxies across the region, as well as its ballistic missile program. With the two of those latter ones having been effectively destroyed by Israel, Iran has no choice except to double down on its weaponization efforts, and open source intelligence has confirmed that. So Iran is getting closer and closer to a nuclear threshold, and the threat is very imminent for the United States and our allies, and Iran is aware of how heightened tensions are amongst the security cabinet, both in Israel and in the United States.
You speak of deterrence, but as Caitlin just mentioned in her report, we're also talking about a weakened Iran. President Trump notably pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, also known as the JCPOA, during his first administration. Today, the Jewish Insider reports former Biden and Obama foreign policy officials applaud Trump's move for directly talking with Iran's supreme leader. What, if any, deal could bring both sides back from the brink at this stage? Is there a diplomatic off-ramp?
The main issue with the original JCPOA agreement enacted in 2015 was the fact that Iran never dismantled its nuclear program. It limited it, which enabled it to later on enrich uranium in undeclared sites. So one critical point, if we're addressing Iran's nuclear program, would be to ensure that it fundamentally removes all of its nuclear capabilities. And President Trump has hinted at this. Now, we ideally would take this a step further and have a more comprehensive agreement that would also consider Iran's regional terroristic activities as well as their ballistic missile program. So these are the main pillars at hand. But then again, the question is whether Ayatollah Khamenei is willing to give up all these concessions. If he does not, he has to go to war effectively with the United States and Israel. So he's in a lose-lose situation.
I want to turn the topic just a bit. One of the key sticking points in the negotiations in the Gaza war is Hamas's demand for a permanent ceasefire. Jonathan, do you think Hamas is likely to agree to another hostage release without getting that permanent truce in return?
It's a matter of how much pressure is going to be exerted on them. Ultimately, from the Israeli side, not being able to finalize any sort of agreement with Hamas would have one, political ramifications, because Netanyahu's government continues to be more fragile if they're not able to maintain this coalition. That's one angle. The other angle would be existential. Once this ceasefire effectively reaches its deadline, other proxies, also led by Tehran, Houthis in Yemen being one of them, are going to re-engage Israel from numerous fronts. So Israel is in a very challenging state right now, given all the range of threats. It is ideal for them to be able to reach an agreement with Hamas, but it is no longer applicable for us to expect to see Hamas governing Gaza, because we've seen what that leads to. So ultimately, the push from Jerusalem is to push out Hamas from Gaza in its entirety, but unfortunately, the Arab countries have rejected that plan.
All right, Jonathan Saya with Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, nearby in Saudi Arabia, it's the backdrop now for a high-stakes meeting between Ukraine and the United States, with both sides hoping for a reset after last month's Oval Office blow-up between Presidents Trump and Zelensky.
The Ukrainians are likely really hoping to turn back on American military aid as well as American intelligence sharing to counter the Russians. For the Americans, they want to push forward with what Donald Trump wants, which is this peace deal, these peace talks between him and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The summit kicks off tomorrow, bringing together Zelensky, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia hopes to boost its global profile by hosting the talks and is positioning itself as a possible site for future peace negotiations between Kiev and Moscow and a potential Trump-Putin meeting. Well, trade tensions are heating up again. China hitting American farm products with new tariffs starting today, and Canada slapping a 25% increase on electricity exports, rather. It's payback after the Trump administration doubled tariffs on Chinese imports. Now the trade war is creating uncertainty, not just on Wall Street, but on Main Street grocery stores too. And while the president hasn't ruled out a recession this year, he insists the tariffs will pay off in the long run.
I think the tariffs are going to be the greatest thing we've ever done as a country. It's going to make our country rich again.
The tariffs already straining relationships with key trading partners, Canada and Mexico. Last week, the Trump administration announced a 25% tariff on imports from both countries, but pressed the pause button before enforcing it. Still, more tariffs are expected in the days and weeks ahead. Well, in other news, the Supreme Court will hear a Colorado case on whether states can ban conversion therapy for LGBTQ kids. Supporters say it regulates licensed professionals, but critics call it a free speech issue. Colorado is one of about half the states with such bans. The case comes as debates play out over transgender rights like gender-affirming care and military service. Justices have also heard a similar case from Tennessee, but have yet to rule on that case. Well, up next, the clock is ticking. Congress working to avoid a potential government shutdown. Can lawmakers cut a deal before time runs out? That's next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. House Republicans are working to shore up support to pass a temporary spending bill. If they fail, we could be facing a possible government shutdown Friday. Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London joins us now with where things stand on that 99-page bill that they released over the weekend. Michelle.
99 pages. Yes, here's what we know so far, John. House Speaker Mike Johnson scheduled a vote for tomorrow on a bill that would increase defense spending by about $6 billion over current spending levels, while funding for non-defense would fall by about $13 billion. The stopgap would include additional ICE funding to help carry out deportations at President Trump's request and maintain a freeze on more than $20 billion in special IRS funding. On his Truth Social platform, Trump praised the bill, calling on Republicans to remain united. And his request for unity appears to be having a positive effect. Some conservatives, like Texas Congressman Chip Roy and South Carolina's Ralph Norman, who usually oppose continuing resolutions, are sounding more open now. Norman, who recently introduced a spending plan of his own, told C-SPAN he's confident Johnson's effort, along with DOJ, will make a dent in the national debt.
We've wasted a lot of time talking about it. We've had a retreat. It's time to put it in action and do what we say we were going to do to the American people, which is cut the deficit, cut unneeded programs, as DOJ is showing, and let's get the job and move on.
Meanwhile, for most Democrats, the spending bill is likely to be a non-starter. Many insist that defense and non-defense spending should move in the same direction. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries recently stated that Republicans decided to take this spending approach means Speaker Johnson's expectation is for Republicans to go at it alone.
Top line numbers were agreed upon in a manner consistent with the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act that Republicans in the House themselves negotiated and supported. A year-long continuing resolution is inconsistent with the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act.
According to Speaker Johnson, the goal is to pass the spending resolution with his razor-thin majority as early as Tuesday. He's hoping to send lawmakers home early and to keep members, especially Senate Democrats, from trying to amend the stopgap and send it back to the House before a potential shutdown. Congress must act by midnight Friday to avoid a partial government shutdown. John.
All right, a lot of information there. Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London. Thank you, Michelle. Well, joining us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. He is also a Faith Nation contributor. Welcome to you, Nathan. So, as Michelle just noted, Republicans have slim majorities in the Senate, razor-thin majority in the House. Do you think they'll be able to muster enough support for the bill to keep the government funded?
Well, it looks like it. I think the most important piece is in play in that President Trump supports it. That has been the wild card in recent months because Republicans negotiate on the Hill and they think they have everything in place, and then one tweet or post on Truth Social or X from either President Trump or Elon Musk, and things go off the rails. And so until the vote actually happens and the continuing resolution is in place, then it looks like Republicans are going to be able to get it done, because Democrats, there is no appetite on the Democratic side to help Republicans get something done, and there's skepticism that if Democrats support a plan that includes government spending, that President Trump and Elon will actually spend that money that is allocated. So there's a lot of distrust right now.
Well, along those lines, as Michelle reported, non-starter for them, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffers wants to show Democrats are united by voting no tomorrow, but that's at odds with his Senate counterpart, Chuck Schumer, who warned his conference about the prospect of a government shutdown and entertaining that idea. Does it not further highlight a lack of a coherent strategy for Democrats? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, Democrats are searching for a strategy as the opposition or minority party. And there are some Democrats who still hold to the idea that the government should not be shut down, just a fundamental belief that the government shouldn't reach that point where some Democrats now are saying, hey, look, Republicans clearly don't care if there's a shutdown. They gladly walk into this, so let them walk into it. They're in control of everything, and let them have the repercussions of the responsibility on their shoulders. So there certainly is not agreement on the Democratic side right now.
Nathan, if this bill or another version ultimately fails and triggers a shutdown, undoubtedly it'll cause more pain, more disruption. Who do you think the public will blame, Republicans or Democrats?
We're in a weird space right now because we're still not that far from the election. We're not that far from Democrats being in control of the Senate, being in control of the White House. So if it happens now, I'm not sure there's going to be a clear winner or clear loser politically, but we're still 20 months away from the midterm elections, and the closer we get to the elections, the harder it will be for Republicans to blame Democrats, because Republicans have that trifecta. They're in control of Washington. The responsibility of the future, the direction of the country, the outlook for the country is going to fall on Republicans.
A little unrelated, but I want to squeeze this in. President Trump weighed in and tried to tamp down the furor from his right flank, people in the MAGA world who are upset with Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett for voting against the Trump administration and essentially not being loyal. Trump did step in and called her a very good and a very smart woman. Nathan, your thoughts in the final few seconds we have left.
Yeah, well, President Trump's reputation is on the line because it was ultimately his choice. And I think he and his followers require a certain sense of loyalty, but there's risk with Supreme Court justices. President George H.W. Bush nominating David Souter, that did not turn out ideologically the way Republicans wanted. So there's risk with these lifetime appointments.
I thought it was interesting that you had some folks from the Federal Society come out and defend her, saying that she still is staunchly conservative, but you do see this backlash, and a really great point you added there, Nathan. Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. We always appreciate your insights. Coming up, egg prices just cracked a record high, why the cost of breakfast keeps rising, and what's being done to fix it. Welcome back. If you've been grocery shopping, you know the average price of eggs has climbed to an all-time high of $4.95 a dozen. That's because the bird flu wiped out 140 million hens, significantly cutting down the supply. Medical reporter Lori Johnson tells us what the Trump administration is doing to fix the problem and how consumers are dealing with the sticker shock.
Many shoppers find themselves cutting back on a favorite food that's a lot more expensive these days.
Oh, I was going to make a quiche that I like to make, and it's about 6 eggs, so I figured I'd do something else. I like to just have scrambled eggs sometimes, and I'm not doing that so much.
As grocery stores take steps to keep them in stock.
Oh, there used to be a sign that said limit 2. I see that it's not there, but there has never been no eggs.
Restaurants also feel the pinch. Max Deli and Cafe used to spend $1,200 for their monthly supply. Now they dish out $4,000.
But we use a lot of eggs. I mean, that's why people come here for breakfast a lot.
To make up for it, they've implemented a $2 egg surcharge, which customers don't like but seem to understand.
It's a supply and demand issue. There was a bird flu and a bunch of birds died, so you have to kind of adapt to the situation.
The Trump administration announced it's now prioritizing ways to reduce the spread of bird flu and tackle the high price of eggs. The new Agriculture Secretary announced a 5-point plan.
That starts with protecting flocks from becoming infected.
Mostly it comes from wildfowl that fly over or get into the barns. So USDA will be producing at no charge an audit to every single egg farmer in this country, and then we will help them secure their barns.
Next, the administration plans to quickly offer replacement birds for the 160 million that were recently killed.
We're talking to 3 or 4 countries right now about getting between 70 and 100 million eggs into the country in the next month or 2, which of course will help with supply and demand.
Lastly, the administration plans to investigate whether birds should be inoculated.
Our poultry industry does not use vaccinations right now. A lot of the industry believes on the egg-laying side that we should.
This is a more long-term goal, as Secretary Rollins said a reliable bird flu vaccine doesn't yet exist. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thank you, Lori. Coming up, a boy and his dog making history. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a dynamic duo set a new record. 6-year-old Freddie Osborne and his pet terrier Penny, you can see them there, won first place at an annual international dog show in the United Kingdom, making Freddie the youngest ever dog handler to win the Crufts competition. The pair has grown up together and had the support of their family to enter the competition, which meant getting Freddie special permission to miss a day of school.
She's my best friend. I love her. She's my favorite dog in the world.
The two took home first in the Best Veteran in Breed category, surrounded by friends and family. And I'd have to say the two of them make quite a good pair. Well, thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Good night.